Hey guys, tonight we're leaving Earth behind and floating 250 miles above the planet in humanity's most ambitious science experiment. The International Space Station, that gleaming beacon of human achievement orbiting our world every 90 minutes. But here's the thing about living in space. It's not the romantic, peaceful experience movies make it out to be. It's a claustrophobic nightmare where your body slowly betrays you. Your mind fights constant panic, and every single day is a battle against the universe trying to kill you in increasingly creative ways. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together, because we're about to find out why you absolutely, positively wouldn't last a single day floating in that metal tube hurtling through the vacuum of space. Congratulations! You've just woken up 250 miles above Earth aboard the International Space Station. Except you didn't really wake up. You kind of floated back to consciousness in a way that makes your brain scream in confusion. There's no up, there's no down. There's just floating and the immediate, overwhelming realization that gravity has completely abandoned you. Your sleeping bag is velcroed to what might be a wall. Or maybe it's the ceiling. You can't tell, because in space, those concepts don't exist. You try to sit up, and instead of the familiar motion of your body pivoting at the waist, you just sort of drift forward, like a very confused ghost. Your arms wave around trying to find something, anything, to grab onto for orientation. But everything you touch just pushes you in the opposite direction. Your inner ear, that miraculous organ that's kept you balanced your entire life on Earth, is now completely useless. It's sending signals to your brain that make absolutely no sense. The fluid in your semicircular canals is floating around in ways it was never designed to do, and your brain is trying to process this information like a computer running software for a completely different operating system. Within seconds, you're nauseous. Not just a little queasy, full-blown, overwhelming, room-spinning nauseous. Except the room isn't spinning. You are. Everything island, nothing island. Your brain can't figure out which way is up, because there is no up, and it responds to this existential crisis by making you want to vomit immediately. And here's the thing about vomiting in zero gravity. It doesn't fall down. It just floats there, in front of your face, like a disgusting, chunky cloud of digestive horror. NASA has a term for this. They call it the vomit comet experience. And it's one of the first things that hits every new astronaut, no matter how much training they've had. You're trying to breathe, but even breathing feels wrong. On Earth, when you inhale, cool air flows down into your lungs, and when you exhale, warm air rises up and away from your face. In space, there's no convection. The carbon dioxide you exhale just sits there around your head like an invisible pillow of suffocation. Without proper air circulation, you're essentially breathing the same air over and over again, slowly poisoning yourself with your own exhalations. Your face feels puffy and swollen because all the fluids in your body that normally get pulled down by gravity are now distributing themselves evenly throughout your system. Your sinuses are completely congested, making you sound like you have the worst head cold of your life. Your eyes feel bulging and pressure-filled, because the fluid that normally drains downward is now just accumulating wherever it wants. You try to move toward what looks like a window, hoping to see Earth and get some visual reference point to help your brain make sense of this nightmare. But moving in zero gravity isn't like swimming through water. It's like trying to swim through nothing while every motion sends you spinning in directions you didn't intend to go. You push off one wall and end up rotating end over end like a tumbling astronaut in the world's most expensive washing machine. Your first attempt at locomotion sends you crashing into the opposite wall, which isn't really a crash because everything happens in slow motion, but your body isn't prepared for the gentle collision that somehow still manages to hurt because you can't brace for impact the way your Earth-trained reflexes want you to. And through all of this disorientation and nausea and confusion, you're starting to realize that this is just the beginning. You haven't even been conscious for 5 minutes, and your body is already in full rebellion against the environment it was never designed to inhabit. The ISS isn't just a space station. It's a carefully controlled life support system, preventing you from dying in the most hostile environment humans have ever tried to live in. Welcome to space. It's trying to kill you already, and you haven't even attempted to eat breakfast yet. You've been awake for maybe 10 minutes now, and your body has decided it's time to mutiny. That nausea we talked about, it's not going away. If anything, it's getting worse. Space sickness, or space adaptation syndrome as NASA politely calls it, affects nearly every human who ventures into zero gravity. And you, with your complete lack of astronaut training, are about to experience it in all its floating, chunky glory. The thing about throwing up on Earth is that once you vomit, it's gone. Gravity pulls it down. You flush it away. You clean up, and you move on with your life. In space, vomit becomes an active participant in your environment. It doesn't fall. It doesn't disappear. It just hangs there in perfect spherical droplets, floating around the cabin like the world's most disgusting snow globe. Astronauts are trained to vomit into bags that they then have to seal immediately to prevent the contents from escaping into the air circulation system. But you don't have that training. You don't know about the bags. You don't know about the proper technique. So when your stomach finally gives up and ejects its contents, you're about to turn the ISS into a Jackson Pollock painting made of partially digested food. The vomit doesn't come out in a neat downward stream like you're used to. Instead, it sort of gurgles out of your mouth and forms floating globs that drift away from your face in every direction. Some of it sticks to your face. Some of it floats toward the air vents. Some of it just hovers nearby, like it's waiting for you to make the next move. And here's where it gets worse. The smell doesn't dissipate. On Earth, odors rise and disperse because of air currents and convection. In space, the smell just sits there in the same location, marinating in the recycled air that you're going to be breathing for the rest of your very short stay aboard the station. Your eyes are watering from the nausea, but tears don't fall in zero gravity either. They just accumulate around your eyes in little pools until they get so big they break free and float away as perfect spheres of salt water. So now you've got vomit globules and tear spheres floating around the cabin like some kind of bodily fluid constellation. But wait, it gets even worse. Your sinuses are completely blocked because of the fluid shift, so you can't breathe through your nose at all. You're mouth breathing, which means you're tasting that floating vomit cloud every time you inhale. The recycled air system is doing its best to filter the air, but it wasn't designed to handle floating chunks of stomach contents. Other astronauts on the station are starting to notice that something is very wrong. They're floating over to check on you, but they're also trying to avoid the growing constellation of biological hazards you've created. They're reaching for cleanup equipment and containment bags while speaking to you in calm, professional voices that can't quite hide their concern about what you've done to their carefully maintained living environment. And through all of this, your inner ear is still sending completely nonsensical signals to your brain. The room appears to be spinning in 3 different directions simultaneously, while also remaining perfectly still. Your brain keeps trying to tell your body to balance itself, but there's nothing to balance against. It's like trying to stand up in a dream where the floor keeps moving away from your feet. The nausea comes in waves now, each one stronger than the last. Your stomach is empty, but your body doesn't care. It keeps trying to evacuate contents that no longer exist. So you're dry heaving, which in zero gravity means you're just sort of convulsing while floating in place, creating even more motion that your already confused inner ear has to try to process. This is minute 15 of your space station experience, and you're already creating a biological hazard that's contaminating the air supply and floating around the cabin like a very personal reminder of why human beings weren't meant to leave the Earth. But don't worry. The real challenges haven't even started yet. Okay, so you've been floating in your own vomit cloud for about 20 minutes now, and nature is calling. Not politely knocking at the door kind of calling. More like breaking down the door with a battering ram kind of calling. You need to use the bathroom. And you need to use it right now. Here's the thing about bathrooms in space. They don't exist. Not in any way that your Earth-trained body and mind would recognize as a bathroom. What the ISS has instead is something called the Waste and Hygiene Compartment. And it's about the size of a phone booth. If phone booths were designed by engineers who had never actually used a toilet in their entire lives, you float over to this compartment, which is basically a tiny closet with a hose, a funnel, some straps, and what can only be described as the most intimidating toilet seat you've ever seen. There are instruction manuals velcroed to the walls. Instruction manuals for using the toilet, because apparently the simple act of human waste elimination requires a user's manual when you remove gravity from the equation. The first thing you notice is that there's no privacy. The door doesn't really close properly because everything has to be designed for emergency access. So you're essentially using the bathroom in a transparent box while other astronauts float by outside. But privacy is about to become the least of your concerns. You try to position yourself on the toilet seat. But positioning yourself in zero gravity is like trying to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster. The toilet seat is maybe 4 inches in diameter. 4 inches. For reference, that's smaller than the opening of a coffee mug. You have to basically clamp yourself onto this tiny opening using footholds and a harness system while hoping that your body's waste products will somehow cooperate with the laws of physics that no longer apply. The toilet uses airflow to pull waste away from your body instead of gravity. It's essentially a vacuum cleaner attached to a toilet seat. But the suction isn't gentle. It's aggressive, industrial-strength suction that feels like it's trying to pull your internal organs out through your digestive tract. Astronauts have described the sensation as uncomfortable and alarming, which in astronaut speak translates to absolutely terrifying. And here's where it gets really fun. You have to turn on the suction before you start, which means you're getting vacuum sealed to a toilet seat while trying to perform basic bodily functions. If you don't position yourself correctly over that 4-inch opening, the suction will pull waste products in directions you never thought possible, essentially spray coating the inside of the compartment with biological matter. For liquid waste, there's a funnel attached to a hose with different attachments for male and female astronauts. The funnel has to be positioned correctly and held in place while the vacuum system sucks the urine away. But in zero gravity, if you let go of the funnel or position it incorrectly, urine doesn't flow down. It floats away in perfect spheres, creating a constellation of golden orbs that drift around the compartment. The whole process requires coordination, timing, and spatial awareness that you simply don't possess. You're still nauseous, still disoriented, still dealing with fluid shifts that make your entire body feel like it belongs to someone else. Your hands are shaking, your depth perception is completely off, and you're trying to perform intimate bodily functions using equipment that seems designed by aliens who had heard about human waste elimination but never actually seen it in person. When things go wrong, and they will go wrong, cleanup becomes a nightmare scenario involving floating waste particles, suction hoses, wet wipes, and disinfectant. Every surface in the tiny compartment has to be cleaned manually because waste doesn't settle on the floor where you can sweep it up. It just floats there, waiting to be captured and disposed of. The astronauts have a term for bathroom incidents on the ISS. They call them brownouts, and they're considered serious enough that there are specific emergency protocols for dealing with contamination events in the waste compartment. These protocols exist because previous astronauts, trained professionals who spent years preparing for space travel, have had accidents that required extensive cleanup and air filtration procedures. You, with zero training and a body that's actively rebelling against the space environment, are about to create an incident that will be talked about in NASA training sessions for decades to come. And you haven't even attempted to eat anything yet, but we'll get to that. Oh, we'll definitely get to that. Congratulations. You've survived your first bathroom experience aboard the ISS. And by survived, I mean you've created a biohazard situation that has required 3 other astronauts and 45 minutes of emergency cleanup procedures. The waste compartment now smells like a combination of industrial disinfectant and regret. And there are still a few rogue particles floating around that seem to have achieved orbit within the station itself. Your stomach is making noises that sound like a garbage disposal trying to eat a brick, and you realize that despite the earlier vomiting incident, you're actually hungry. Hungry in that lightheaded, shaky way that suggests your blood sugar has dropped to levels typically reserved for medical emergencies. Food sounds good right now. Food sounds necessary. This is the moment when you discover that eating in space is less like dining and more like trying to perform surgery on yourself while riding a mechanical bull in a house of mirrors. An astronaut floats over with what they optimistically call breakfast. It's a pouch of rehydrated scrambled eggs, a packet of orange juice powder, and some coffee that comes in what looks like a toothpaste tube. Everything is designed to prevent crumbs or liquid droplets from floating away and contaminating the air supply or getting into sensitive equipment. This means your food has the texture of baby food and the visual appeal of something you'd feed to someone who'd lost the ability to chew. The scrambled eggs come in a pouch that you have to inject with hot water from a dispenser that looks like it belongs in a chemistry lab. You need the pouch to mix the water with the freeze-dried egg powder, creating a substance that has the consistency of wallpaper paste and the color of something that died several weeks ago. You squeeze this mixture directly into your mouth because using utensils in zero gravity is like trying to perform brain surgery with oven mitts while blindfolded. The eggs taste like salted cardboard with a hint of preservatives and the lingering aftertaste of whatever plastic the pouch was made from. But here's the really fun part. Swallowing in zero gravity doesn't work the same way it does on Earth. On Earth, gravity helps pull food down your esophagus toward your stomach. In space, you have to rely entirely on the muscular contractions of your throat to push food in the right direction. But your body is still confused about which direction is down. So sometimes food just gets stuck halfway down your throat, while your esophagus tries to figure out where it's supposed to be pushing. This leads to a sensation that can only be described as having food lodged in your throat, while simultaneously feeling like you might vomit it back up, except the vomit would just float away in a chunky cloud instead of providing any relief. You end up making these weird swallowing motions and throat-clearing sounds that make you look like a broken robot trying to digest a tennis ball. The orange juice powder is supposed to be mixed with water from a pouch, but controlling the flow of liquid in zero gravity requires skills you don't possess. Instead of a controlled stream of water, you get either nothing or a sudden burst that creates orange-flavored water spheres that float away before you can catch them. You end up chasing floating drops of orange juice around the cabin with your mouth open like some kind of dehydrated space fish. When you do manage to capture some of the orange juice, it doesn't taste refreshing. It tastes like tang mixed with recycled water that's been filtered through machines for months. There's a metallic aftertaste that suggests the water has been in close contact with a lot of space station equipment, and a slightly stale flavor that reminds you that this liquid has been cycled through the life support systems more times than you want to think about. The coffee situation is even worse. It comes in a tube that you squeeze directly into your mouth, but controlling the flow requires pressure sensitivity that you haven't developed. You either get nothing or you get a mouthful of coffee that's too hot, too bitter, and has the consistency of syrup because it's designed to stay together in zero gravity rather than provide any actual coffee drinking experience. And here's the thing about eating in space that nobody talks about. Floating food particles. Despite all the precautions and special packaging, tiny bits of food inevitably escape and start floating around the cabin. These particles get into the air circulation system, stick to surfaces, and create what can only be described as an ongoing food contamination situation. You're trying to eat your breakfast while simultaneously creating a debris field of food particles that will be floating around the station for hours. Other astronauts are politely trying to capture stray bits of your meal before they drift into sensitive equipment or get inhaled by someone else. By the time you finish eating, if you can call what you just did eating, you feel less nourished and more like you've just participated in some kind of endurance challenge designed to test your ability to consume calories under the most unpleasant conditions possible. And now your body has to try to digest this meal while floating in zero gravity, which means your digestive system is about to encounter problems it was never designed to handle. But we'll get to that. Oh yes, we'll definitely get to that. It's been about 2 hours since you woke up aboard the ISS, and your body is starting to realize that something is fundamentally wrong with this situation. Not just the nausea and the disorientation and the bathroom nightmares. Something deeper. Something that threatens your very existence on a cellular level. You see, human beings evolved over millions of years under the constant influence of gravity. Every system in your body, from your cardiovascular system to your bones, to your inner ear, is designed to function with the assumption that there will always be a consistent downward force acting on your entire body. Remove that force, and your body starts to fall apart in ways that would make a horror movie director take notes. Let's start with your bones. Right now, as you float there trying to figure out how to move without spinning uncontrollably, your bones are beginning to dissolve. Not metaphorically, literally. In zero gravity, your body assumes that since there's no gravitational stress on your skeletal system, you must not need all those heavy, energy-expensive bones anymore. So it starts breaking them down and recycling the calcium. Astronauts lose bone density at a rate of about 1% per month in space. That might not sound like much, but remember, you're not a trained astronaut who's been preparing for this for years. You're just a regular person whose bones are about to start crumbling like chalk. By the end of your first day, the process has already begun. Your body is literally eating your skeleton from the inside. Your muscles are having a similar crisis. Every muscle in your body that normally works against gravity to keep you upright, to help you walk, to maintain your posture, those muscles suddenly have nothing to do. So your body, in its infinite efficiency, decides to get rid of them. Muscle atrophy in space happens faster than almost any other environment except complete paralysis. Your heart, that magnificent muscle that's been pumping blood against gravity your entire life, is now confused and overworked. On Earth, your heart has to pump blood up to your brain against gravitational force. In space, it doesn't. So all that blood that normally pools in your legs is now floating around your upper body and head, making you feel puffy and congested while your heart tries to figure out how hard it needs to work. This fluid shift is why your face looks swollen and why you can't breathe through your nose. About 1.5 liters of fluid that normally stays in your lower body has migrated north and is now making your head feel like an overfilled water balloon. Your sinuses are completely blocked, your eyes are puffy, and you look like you've been stung by a swarm of space bees. But the cardiovascular confusion gets worse. Your body thinks you're retaining too much fluid because of all the extra blood volume in your upper body, so it starts producing less blood. Simultaneously, you're losing red blood cells at an accelerated rate. This creates a perfect storm of blood chemistry changes that leave you feeling weak, dizzy, and like your circulatory system is trying to abandon ship. Your inner ear, meanwhile, is having a complete nervous breakdown. The otoliths, tiny calcium carbonate crystals in your inner ear that help you sense which way is up, are now floating around randomly because there's no gravitational reference point. It's like having dice rattling around in your head. Instead of a functioning balance system, this creates a condition called neurovestibular dysfunction, which is a fancy way of saying your brain can't figure out how your body is oriented in space. You feel like you're constantly falling while simultaneously spinning in all directions. Some astronauts describe it as being drunk, dizzy, and seasick all at the same time. Except it doesn't go away when you lie down because there is no lying down. Your spine is also experiencing an existential crisis. On Earth, gravity compresses your spine throughout the day, and you literally get shorter as the day goes on. In space, without that compression, your spine stretches out. Astronauts can grow up to 2 inches taller during extended stays on the ISS. That sounds fun. until you realize that your spinal column stretching is causing pressure on nerves, back pain, and coordination problems. And we haven't even talked about what space radiation is doing to your cells. The ISS orbits above most of Earth's protective atmosphere, which means you're being bombarded by cosmic radiation and solar particles that are literally damaging your DNA. Every minute you spend in space, high-energy particles are smashing through your body, potentially causing cancer, cataracts, and cellular damage that won't show up for years. Your immune system, confused by the strange environment and the stress your body is under, is starting to weaken. Wounds heal more slowly in space. Infections are more dangerous. And your body's ability to fight off illness is compromised just when you need it most. This is only the beginning of day one, and your body is already starting to shut down systems, dissolve bones, and redirect resources in ways that will leave you weaker, sicker, and more vulnerable with every passing hour. But hey, at least you're in space, right? Living the dream or the nightmare. Definitely the nightmare. By now, you've been aboard the ISS for about 3 hours, and the reality of your situation is starting to sink in. You're trapped in a metal tube hurtling through space at 500 miles per hour. Your body is slowly dissolving, and you're sharing this confined space with other people who are probably starting to realize that you're not exactly astronaut material. Let's talk about that space. The International Space Station is often described as being the size of a football field, which sounds spacious until you realize that most of that space is taken up by equipment, experiments, supplies, and life support systems. The actual livable volume is about the same as a 6-bedroom house. Except it's a 6-bedroom house where the bedrooms are the size of phone booths, and every wall is covered with switches, monitors, and equipment that will kill you if you touch the wrong thing. You're sharing this space with up to 6 other people, and there's nowhere to go to be alone. No backyard to step into, no porch to sit on, no car to drive away in. Just the same recycled air, the same humming machinery, and the same faces looking at you with increasing concern as they realize you're not handling the space environment with the grace and professionalism they're used to. The noise is constant and overwhelming. The ISS sounds like the inside of a computer server room that's been filled with aquarium pumps and washing machines. Fans whir constantly to circulate air. Pumps gurgle to move water through the cooling systems. Equipment beeps and chirps and hums with electronic alerts and status updates. The solar panels creak and flex as the station moves in and out of sunlight. There's no silence, ever. And the smell. Oh, the smell. It's a unique combination of machine oil, recycled air, human bodies that can't shower properly, food that comes in pouches, and the lingering chemical scent of all the cleaning products and disinfectants needed to keep the station habitable. Some astronauts describe it as smelling like hot metal mixed with body odor and industrial solvents. Others are less diplomatic. The temperature varies wildly depending on where you are in the station and whether you're in sunlight or shadow. The ISS orbits Earth every 90 minutes, which means you experience sunrise and sunset 16 times per day. When you're in sunlight, parts of the station can get uncomfortably warm. When you're in Earth's shadow, other parts get cold enough that you can see your breath. But it's not just the physical discomfort. It's the psychological pressure of being completely dependent on life support systems that could fail at any moment. Every breath you take has been recycled through machines. The water you drink has been filtered and processed from waste and humidity. The air you breathe is constantly being scrubbed of carbon dioxide by chemical processes that you don't understand, but that your life depends on. There are emergency procedures for everything: fire, depressurization, toxic atmosphere, equipment failure, medical emergencies, computer malfunctions. The astronauts around you know these procedures by heart because they've trained for years. You don't. You're essentially a passenger on an airplane where you don't know where the exits are, how the oxygen masks work, or what to do if the engines fail. Except instead of crashing into the ground, you'll die in the vacuum of space. The windows, those beautiful portholes that show the stunning view of Earth below, also remind you of exactly how far you are from everything you've ever known. When you look out at Earth rotating slowly beneath you, it's beautiful. Yes, but it's also a constant reminder that you're completely cut off from every other human being except the few people sharing this tin can with you. And those people are starting to realize that you're not just having a rough adjustment period, you're having a full-scale breakdown in an environment where breakdowns can be fatal. They're watching you carefully, speaking to mission control about your condition, and probably calculating how quickly they can get you back to Earth if you continue to deteriorate. The claustrophobia is starting to set in. Not just the physical claustrophobia of being in a small space, but the existential claustrophobia of being trapped 250 miles above Earth, with no way to leave, no way to get fresh air, no way to step outside, and no way to escape from your own failing body and panicking mind. This is hour 3. And you're just beginning to understand what it means to be completely at the mercy of an environment that is actively trying to kill you every second of every minute of every hour you remain here. And we're not even halfway through your first day yet. Hour 4 aboard the ISS. And it's time for you to learn about one of the most dreaded aspects of life in space: exercise. You might think that in a place where you're weightless and floating around, exercise would be fun, easy, maybe even refreshing. You would be catastrophically wrong. Exercise in space isn't about fitness or feeling good. It's about survival. Without the constant resistance provided by gravity, your muscles and bones will deteriorate so rapidly that you'll be unable to walk when you return to Earth. Astronauts have to exercise for 2.5 hours every day just to slow down the rate at which their bodies are falling apart. And now, it's your turn. An astronaut floats over to show you the exercise equipment, and you immediately realize why astronauts sometimes describe their workout routine as torture. The treadmill, called Kolpa, looks like a medieval punishment device designed by engineers who had a grudge against human comfort. You have to strap yourself to it using a harness system that feels like being tied to a mechanical bull. Except the mechanical bull is trying to make you run while floating in zero gravity. The harness goes around your shoulders and waist, with bungee cords that pull you down toward the treadmill surface. But down doesn't exist in space, so you're essentially being stretched and compressed by elastic cords while trying to run on a moving belt that's vibrating the entire space station. The resistance has to be set high enough to simulate your body weight, which means the bungee cords are pulling on you with about 150 pounds of force. You start running, or what passes for running when you're being held in place by a web of straps and cords. Immediately, you realize that your body has no idea how to coordinate running movements without gravity. Your legs are moving, but your brain can't figure out the rhythm because there's no weight transfer from foot to foot. It's like trying to run in a dream where your legs don't work properly. The harness digs into your shoulders and hips. The bungee cords create uneven pressure that makes you feel like you're being stretched on a rack. Your feet keep slipping on the treadmill belt because you can't put your full weight down to get proper traction. Every step feels awkward and unnatural, like you're learning to walk for the first time, except you're being forced to do it at running speed. Within minutes, you're exhausted. Not the good kind of exhausted that comes from a satisfying workout, but the desperate, panicky exhaustion that comes from fighting against equipment that seems designed to defeat you. Your heart rate spikes not just from exertion, but from the stress of trying to coordinate movements that your body can't figure out how to perform. But wait, there's more. Next up is the resistance exercise device, A, which uses vacuum canisters to create resistance for weightlifting exercises. It's like a gym machine that's been reimagined by someone who wanted to make lifting weights as uncomfortable and disorienting as possible. You have to strap yourself to the machine using foot restraints and stabilization straps. Then perform exercises like squats, deadlifts, and bench presses while floating in zero gravity. The resistance feels weird and uneven because it's created by air pressure rather than actual weights. Your body can't figure out how to brace itself properly because there's no stable platform to push against. During squats, you're essentially being pulled in opposite directions by restraint systems while trying to perform a movement that requires gravity to make sense. Your inner ear is still confused about spatial orientation, so you feel like you're squatting in multiple directions simultaneously. The resistance kicks in at unexpected moments, throwing off your balance and coordination in ways that make you feel like you're wrestling with the machine rather than exercising. The bench press is even worse. You're lying on your back, except there is no back, because you're floating. You're held in position by straps and restraints while trying to press against resistance that feels nothing like actual weights. Your shoulders and core muscles, already weakened by hours in zero gravity, can't provide the stability you need to perform the movement safely. Throughout this entire exercise session, you're sweating profusely, but sweat doesn't drip off your body in space. Instead, it forms a layer of moisture that clings to your skin like a personal humidity bubble. The sweat gets in your eyes and stays there. It soaks into your exercise clothes and just sits there because there's no airflow to help with evaporation. By the time the exercise session is over, you feel like you've been in a fight with a mechanical octopus and lost badly. Your muscles are shaking from the unnatural movements and the stress of trying to exercise in an environment where nothing works the way your body expects it to. You're drenched in sweat that won't go away, exhausted from movements that didn't feel like real exercise, and sore in places you didn't know could be sore. And you have to do this every single day you're in space, for hours at a time, just to slow down the rate at which your body is dissolving. This is not fitness. This is fighting for survival against an environment that wants to turn your muscles into jelly and your bones into dust. Hour 5, and you've survived the exercise torture session, but now you need to clean up. This brings us to one of the most challenging aspects of daily life in space: personal hygiene. And by challenging, I mean it's like trying to take a shower inside a washing machine that's tumbling down a mountain. First, let's talk about what you can't do. You can't take a shower. You can't take a bath. You can't stand under running water and let it wash over your body. Water in zero gravity doesn't flow down. It forms perfect spheres that float around and stick to everything they touch. A shower on the ISS would essentially be like trapping yourself in a small room with thousands of floating water balloons that are actively trying to get into your nose, mouth, eyes, and every piece of electronic equipment. What you get instead is something called a no-rinse body bath, which is exactly as unsatisfying as it sounds. You have packets of no-rinse shampoo and body wash that you squeeze onto your hair and skin, then try to scrub and wipe off with towels. It's like trying to clean yourself with baby wipes. Except the baby wipes are designed for someone who's never actually seen a baby. The shampoo comes out in a thick, gooey consistency that doesn't spread evenly through your hair. You massage it in, and it just sort of sits there on your scalp like hair gel made of soap. When you try to wipe it off with a towel, it doesn't come out cleanly. Instead, it leaves your hair feeling sticky, slightly damp, and with a texture that can only be described as crunchy. Washing your body is equally frustrating. The body wash is supposed to clean and moisturize without needing to be rinsed off, but it leaves a film on your skin that makes you feel like you're covered in a thin layer of lotion mixed with soap residue. You never feel truly clean, just differently dirty. And let's talk about that sweat situation from your exercise session. In zero gravity, sweat doesn't evaporate the way it does on Earth. Instead, it forms a layer of moisture that clings to your skin and hair like personal humidity. This means you're constantly slightly damp, which creates perfect conditions for bacteria and fungal growth. Your clothes present another problem entirely. You can't wash clothes on the ISS. The washing machine would require too much water, and water floating around the cabin would be catastrophic for the electronic systems. So you wear the same clothes for days at a time until they become too disgusting to tolerate. Then you throw them away. Underwear gets changed every few days. T-shirts and pants might be worn for a week or more before being discarded. By the time you change clothes, they're stiff with dried sweat, and they smell like a gym locker that's been sealed for months. The new clothes feel amazing by comparison, but within hours, they start the same process of accumulating body oils, sweat, and dead skin cells. Brushing your teeth is another adventure in fluid dynamics and zero-gravity physics. The toothpaste is designed to be edible because you can't spit it out. Where would you spit? Into the air circulation system? Into the electronics? Instead, you brush your teeth with edible toothpaste and then swallow it, which tastes exactly as pleasant as you'd imagine. The water for brushing comes from a pouch that you have to squeeze carefully into your mouth. Too much pressure, and you get a mouthful of water that you then have to try to swallow while brushing, which is like trying to gargle while chewing gum. Too little pressure, and you don't have enough water to make the toothpaste work properly. Your hair, meanwhile, is becoming its own separate entity. Without gravity to keep it down, it floats around your head like you're permanently underwater. It gets in your eyes, your mouth, your food, and other people's personal space. Some astronauts describe their hair as becoming aggressive in space, actively trying to escape from their heads and explore the cabin independently. Nail clipping requires special equipment because nail clippings in zero gravity become tiny projectiles that float around the cabin indefinitely. They have to be cut near an air intake vent so they get sucked into the filtration system, or captured immediately with tape or vacuum tools. By the end of your hygiene routine, you feel marginally cleaner than you did before, but nowhere near as clean as a quick shower would have made you feel on Earth. You're damp, sticky, and your hair looks like you've been electrocuted. And this is as good as it gets. This is peak personal cleanliness for your entire stay aboard the ISS. You're starting to understand why long-duration astronauts sometimes describe the return to Earth's first shower as a religious experience. Hour 6 aboard the ISS, and you're discovering one of the most disorienting aspects of life in space. Time doesn't work the same way anymore. On Earth, you have natural circadian rhythms regulated by the 24-hour cycle of day and night. Your body knows when to be sleepy, when to be alert, when to eat, and when to rest, based on the rising and setting of the Sunday. In space, you experience 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every 24 hours, because the ISS orbits Earth every 90 minutes. This means that every 45 minutes, you go from bright daylight to complete darkness and back again. Your brain, which has been calibrated by millions of years of evolution to expect a single day-night cycle, is now completely confused about what time it is and what it should be doing. The artificial lighting system on the ISS tries to simulate a normal day-night cycle, but it's not the same as real sunlight. The lights are fluorescent and LED panels that provide illumination but don't have the same spectrum or intensity as the Sunday. Your brain can tell the difference, and it's not happy about being tricked. This creates a condition called circadian rhythm disruption, which sounds clinical but feels like permanent jet lag, mixed with insomnia and depression. Your body doesn't know when to produce melatonin to make you sleepy. It doesn't know when to release cortisol to make you alert. It's like your internal clock has been smashed with a hammer, and the pieces scattered across 16 different time zones. You feel tired, but not sleepy tired. More like exhausted but wired, like you've had too much caffeine and not enough sleep for several days running. Your concentration is shot. Your mood is unstable. You feel irritable and confused, but you can't tell if it's because of the circadian disruption, the stress of being in space, the nausea, the claustrophobia, or the fact that your body is slowly dissolving. The view out the windows makes it even worse. One moment, you're looking at the bright, sunlit surface of Earth, with white clouds and blue oceans. 45 minutes later, you're in complete darkness, seeing only the scattered lights of cities far below and the vast emptiness of space stretching out to infinity. Then, 45 minutes after that, you're back in blazing sunlight. It's beautiful and terrifying and completely disorienting. Your brain keeps trying to process these rapid transitions from day to night, but it can't keep up. It's like watching a time-lapse video of Earth rotating, except you're living inside the time-lapse and your body is trying to adapt to a schedule that doesn't exist anywhere in human experience. The other astronauts have developed coping strategies over years of training and experience. They use sleep masks, specialized lighting, medication, and carefully timed meal schedules to try to maintain some semblance of a normal circadian rhythm. But these strategies take time to learn and implement, and they don't work for everyone. You, meanwhile, are experiencing all of this circadian chaos, while also dealing with space sickness, fluid shifts, muscle atrophy, bone loss, and the general stress of being trapped in a metal tube hurtling through the vacuum of space. Your body's stress response is constantly activated, which further disrupts your sleep patterns and makes it even harder for your brain to figure out what time it is or what it should be doing. The combination of sleep disruption and stress creates a feedback loop that makes everything worse. You're too tired to think clearly, but too wired to rest. You're exhausted but alert, sleepy but unable to sleep, hungry at the wrong times, and wide awake when you should be resting. And this is just the beginning. The longer you stay in space, the worse the circadian disruption becomes. Some astronauts report that it takes weeks or even months after returning to Earth for their sleep patterns to normalize. But you don't have weeks or months. You barely have hours before your body and mind reach the breaking point. This is hour 7. And we need to talk about something that nobody likes to discuss, but everyone experiences in space: the psychological breakdown. By now, the combination of physical discomfort, sensory overload, claustrophobia, and complete isolation from everything familiar is starting to crack your mental defenses like a sledgehammer hitting glass. Let's start with the panic attacks. They usually begin around this point in a non-astronaut's space experience, triggered by the sudden realization of exactly how far you are from help, from escape, from anything resembling safety or normalcy. You're 250 miles above Earth, traveling at 500 miles per hour, completely dependent on life support systems you don't understand, surrounded by people you don't really know, in an environment that is actively trying to kill you. The panic starts as a tightness in your chest, a feeling like you can't quite catch your breath. But in space, that feeling of breathlessness might not be panic. It might be the CO2 scrubbers malfunctioning. It might be a problem with the oxygen generation system. It might be the beginning of a catastrophic life support failure that will kill everyone aboard the station. So now you're having a panic attack about having what might not actually be a panic attack, and your brain starts spiraling through every possible disaster scenario. Fire in space means you can't escape outside to safety. Depressurization means you have seconds to get to a pressurized module, or you'll die in the vacuum. Equipment failure means you might slowly suffocate as the air gets thinner and more toxic. The rational part of your brain knows that the ISS has multiple backup systems, emergency procedures, and that the astronauts around you are trained to handle emergencies. But the terrified part of your brain, the part that's currently driving the bus, is screaming that you're trapped in a death trap with no way out and no control over your situation. Claustrophobia kicks in next. The ISS suddenly feels impossibly small. What seemed spacious enough a few hours ago now feels like being buried alive in a high-tech coffin. Every wall is covered with equipment and switches and monitors closing in on you. The constant noise of fans and pumps and life support systems sounds like the station is struggling to keep you alive, making mechanical death rattles as it fights against the vacuum trying to get in. You start to feel like the walls are getting closer, like the ceiling is pressing down, like the air is getting thicker and harder to breathe. You want to get outside, to get away, to have space to move and breathe. But outside is instant death in the vacuum of space. There is no outside. There is no away. There is only this metal tube and the infinite, empty, hostile universe surrounding it. The isolation hits you next. Every person you've ever known, every place you've ever been, every experience you've ever had is on that blue marble rotating slowly beneath you. Your family, your friends, your home, your dog, your favorite restaurant, your comfortable bed, all of it is on a planet that looks like a small, fragile ornament from where you're floating. If something happened to you right now, if you had a heart attack or a stroke or an accident, there's no emergency room to rush to. There's no hospital, There's no doctor except maybe one of the astronauts who has some medical training. There's no way to call for help from anyone except the handful of people sharing this tin can with you. The psychological term for this is overview effect, but that usually refers to the profound, positive realization of how small and interconnected everything on Earth appears from space. What you're experiencing is more like overview terror, the crushing realization of how far you are from everything that matters and how completely vulnerable you are. Your mind starts playing tricks on you. Every sound the station makes sounds like something breaking. Every vibration feels like the structure is coming apart. Every change in air pressure feels like the beginning of catastrophic depressurization. You start checking the windows obsessively, looking for cracks or signs of damage. The other astronauts notice your deteriorating mental state. They're trained to recognize and manage psychological emergencies because they know that panic spreads quickly in confined spaces, and a panicking crew member can endanger everyone aboard the station. They speak to you in calm, professional voices, but you can see the concern in their eyes. They're probably communicating with mission control about your condition, discussing whether you need medication, restraints, or emergency evacuation procedures. This is hour 7, and your mind is starting to understand what your body figured out hours ago. You were never meant to be here. Hour 8, and your body has moved beyond discomfort into active rebellion. The fluid shifts we talked about earlier aren't just making you look puffy anymore. They're creating serious cardiovascular problems that are affecting your ability to think, move, and function. About 2 liters of fluid that normally stays in your lower body has migrated to your head and upper torso. Your face is so swollen you look like you've been stung by bees. Your sinuses are completely blocked, creating pressure that feels like someone is slowly inflating a balloon inside your skull. Your eyes are bulging and watery, and the pressure behind them is creating headaches that feel like someone is driving spikes through your temples. But the real problem is what this fluid shift is doing to your brain. The increased intracranial pressure is affecting your cognitive function, making it hard to concentrate, remember things, or think clearly. This condition, called Spaceflight-Associated Neuroocular Syndrome, or SANS, is one of the most serious health risks of long-term space travel. Your vision is starting to blur because the fluid pressure is changing the shape of your eyeballs and affecting your optic nerves. Some astronauts develop permanent vision problems after extended stays in space. You've been here for 8 hours, and you're already having trouble focusing on objects more than a few feet away. The cardiovascular changes are equally serious. Your heart, confused by the lack of gravity, is working overtime to pump blood that doesn't need to be pumped upward anymore. Your blood pressure is fluctuating wildly as your cardiovascular system tries to figure out how to function in an environment it was never designed for. You're also becoming dangerously dehydrated, but not in the way you'd expect. Your body thinks you're retaining too much fluid because of all the extra blood volume in your upper body, so it's producing less antidiuretic hormone. This means you're urinating more frequently while simultaneously losing fluid through respiration and sweating. The dehydration, combined with the cardiovascular stress and fluid shifts, is making you feel weak, dizzy, and confused. Your hands are shaking slightly, and you feel like you might pass out. Except passing out in zero gravity means floating unconsciously while potentially inhaling your own vomit or hitting equipment that could injure you or damage critical systems. Your digestive system is also in crisis. The fluid shifts and stress hormones are affecting your gut bacteria and digestive processes. You feel nauseated but also strangely hungry. Food doesn't taste right because your sense of smell is blocked by sinus congestion, and your sense of taste is affected by the fluid shifts and stress. When you do try to eat, your stomach rebels. The lack of gravity means food doesn't settle in your stomach the way it's supposed to. Instead, it just sort of floats around in your digestive system, creating a feeling of fullness and nausea that doesn't go away even when you're hungry. Your kidneys are working overtime to process all the extra fluid that your body is trying to get rid of, but they're also struggling with the changes in blood chemistry caused by the space environment. Kidney stones are a real risk for astronauts because of changes in calcium metabolism and hydration levels. Your immune system is starting to shut down from stress and the space environment. Wounds heal more slowly in space. Infections are more dangerous, and your body's ability to fight off illness is compromised. A simple cut or scratch that would be minor on Earth could become a serious medical problem in space. The radiation exposure is also starting to take its toll at the cellular level. High-energy cosmic rays and solar particles are passing through your body constantly, potentially damaging DNA and increasing your risk of cancer. The ISS provides some shielding, but it's not complete protection. All of these physical problems are compounding the psychological stress, creating a cascade of failing systems that make it harder and harder for your body to cope with the space environment. You're not just uncomfortable anymore. You're in medical crisis, and there's no emergency room to go to. This is hour 8, and your body is sending you a very clear message. Get back to Earth immediately, or face consequences that could be permanent. Hour 9 aboard the ISS, and we need to address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the elephant floating in zero gravity. Your digestive system has been under assault for the past 9 hours, and it's about to make its displeasure known in a way that will traumatize you and everyone else aboard the station. Let's start with gas. On Earth, gas bubbles rise through liquid in your digestive system and can be released in a relatively controlled manner. In zero gravity, gas bubbles don't rise. They just stay suspended throughout your digestive system like tiny balloons at a very uncomfortable party. This means that when you feel gassy, the sensation is completely different from what you're used to. Instead of pressure building up and moving in a predictable direction, you feel like your entire digestive system is inflated with bubbles that can't find their way out. The discomfort is intense and persistent, and when gas is finally released, it happens all at once in spectacular fashion. But here's the really fun part. In the confined space of the ISS, there's nowhere for odors to go. On Earth, bad smells dissipate because of air currents and ventilation. In space, air circulation is carefully controlled to prevent contamination of sensitive equipment, which means your digestive mishaps become part of the shared atmosphere for extended periods. The other astronauts are now experiencing your internal biology as a group activity. They're too polite to say anything directly, but you can see them subtly moving away from your general vicinity and increasing the ventilation in whatever module you're occupying. Your bowel movements, already complicated by the zero-gravity toilet situation we discussed earlier, are becoming increasingly urgent and unpredictable. The combination of stress, diet changes, fluid shifts, and the space environment is wreaking havoc on your digestive system's timing and consistency. When you do attempt to use the waste compartment again, the results are even more catastrophic than your first attempt. Your digestive system, confused by 9 hours in zero gravity, produces waste that doesn't behave according to Earth physics. The consistency is wrong, the timing is wrong, and your ability to control the process is severely compromised. The vacuum system that's supposed to contain waste products is overwhelmed by the volume and consistency of what you're producing. Warning lights start flashing in the waste compartment as sensors detect contamination levels beyond normal parameters. This triggers emergency cleanup protocols that require multiple astronauts and specialized equipment to resolve. The waste compartment has to be shut down for deep cleaning and decontamination, which means nobody else can use the bathroom until the situation is resolved. Meanwhile, you're dealing with intestinal cramping that feels different from anything you've experienced on Earth. Without gravity, the normal peristaltic motion of your intestines is disrupted, creating pressure and discomfort that moves around your abdominal cavity in unpredictable ways. You feel like you need to go to the bathroom constantly. But when you try, either nothing happens or everything happens at once. There's no middle ground, no gradual relief, just sudden, urgent crises, followed by periods of uncomfortable pressure. The medical term for what you're experiencing is space constipation, followed by space diarrhea, often occurring in rapid succession as your digestive system swings between extremes while trying to figure out how to function without gravity. The astronauts are now discussing your condition in hushed tones while floating near the communications equipment. You catch fragments of conversations about digestive distress, contamination protocols, and early return procedures. Your digestive crisis isn't just uncomfortable. It's become a threat to the health and safety of everyone aboard the station. The air filtration systems are working overtime to process the atmospheric contamination you've created, and there are genuine concerns about the spread of bacteria and the functionality of critical life support equipment. This is Hour 9, and your digestive system has just declared war on the International Space Station. Hour 10, and it's time to talk about sleep. Or, more accurately, the complete impossibility of sleep in an environment where your body has forgotten how to rest. Despite being exhausted in ways you didn't know were possible, actually falling asleep in space presents challenges that would make an insomniac weep with frustration. First, there's no lying down. This might seem obvious, but your brain doesn't quite grasp it until you try to sleep. Every night of your life, you've laid down on a horizontal surface and let gravity settle your body into a resting position. In space, there is no horizontal. There is no resting position. There is only floating in whatever orientation you can manage to maintain. Astronauts sleep in sleeping bags that are attached to walls. But even strapped into a sleeping bag, you're not really lying down. You're sort of suspended vertically or diagonally, or in some orientation that your brain can't quite categorize. Your body keeps trying to find a comfortable position that doesn't exist. Without gravity, your spine doesn't compress and settle the way it does on Earth. Instead, it stretches out, which sounds relaxing but actually creates pressure on nerves and joints that results in back pain and discomfort. Your arms float up in front of you like a zombie unless you consciously hold them down, which requires muscle tension that prevents true relaxation. Your head, filled with excess fluid from the cardiovascular changes we discussed earlier, feels like it's floating separately from your body. The pressure in your sinuses and behind your eyes creates a constant headache that gets worse when you try to relax because there's nowhere for your head to rest comfortably. The sleep environment itself is a sensory nightmare. The constant noise of fans, pumps, and life support systems creates a background hum that's loud enough to be annoying but not consistent enough to become white noise. Equipment beeps and chirps randomly throughout the night cycle as systems monitor themselves and communicate with mission control. The artificial lighting system dims during the designated sleep period, but it's not true darkness. Status lights blink constantly, computer screens glow, and the aurora borealis outside the windows creates an ethereal light show that would be beautiful if you weren't trying to sleep. Every 90 minutes, the station transitions from sunlight to darkness and back again, which means even with the artificial lighting, your environment is constantly changing. Your brain keeps trying to wake up during the sunlight phases and sleep during the dark phases, which happens 16 times during each Earth day. Temperature control becomes a nightmare when you're trying to sleep. Your sleeping bag holds in body heat, but without gravity to help distribute that heat evenly, you end up with hot spots and cold spots throughout your body. Your feet might be cold while your torso is overheating, creating a feeling like being sick with a fever. But the worst part is the psychological aspect of trying to sleep while floating in a metal tube surrounded by the vacuum of space. Every creak and groan of the station sounds like structural failure. Every change in air pressure feels like the beginning of depressurization. Every unexpected noise makes you wonder if something critical has just broken. Your dreams, when you finally do manage to fall asleep, are bizarre and disturbing. They often involve falling, which makes sense because your inner ear is constantly sending signals to your brain that you're in free fall. You wake up in a panic, flailing around trying to catch yourself, only to remember that you're floating in zero gravity and there's nothing to fall toward. Sleep paralysis becomes more common and more terrifying in space because you can't tell the difference between being unable to move because of sleep paralysis and being unable to move because you're floating and have nothing to push against. The few hours of sleep you do manage to get are fragmented and unrefreshing. You wake up feeling more tired than when you went to sleep, with a headache from the fluid pressure, muscle aches from trying to maintain position all night, and the lingering anxiety of having spent hours floating in a tin can while unconscious and vulnerable. This is hour 10, and your body is learning that rest is just another thing that doesn't work in space. Hour 11, and the reality of your situation is becoming impossible to ignore. The International Space Station, that marvel of human engineering and international cooperation, is revealed for what it really is when you're not a trained astronaut. A collection of systems that can fail, environments that can become contaminated, and equipment that can malfunction with potentially fatal consequences. Let's talk about the fires that can happen in space, because they're not like fires on Earth. In zero gravity, flames don't burn upward in the familiar teardrop shape. Instead, they burn in perfect spheres, consuming oxygen from all directions simultaneously. This makes them much more efficient at depleting the limited oxygen supply aboard the station. Fire suppression in space is also completely different. You can't just spray water on a fire because water forms floating spheres that could short out electrical equipment or be inhaled by crew members. Instead, fires have to be fought with special foam, or by shutting down ventilation to starve them of oxygen. Which also means the crew has to evacuate to a different module until the fire burns itself out. The smoke from a space fire doesn't rise and disperse. It just sits there in a toxic cloud that has to be filtered out by the air handling systems, assuming those systems are still functioning. Some types of fires produce smoke that can't be easily filtered, creating a situation where the entire station becomes uninhabitable until the air can be completely exchanged. Then there's depressurization, the nightmare scenario that every astronaut trains for but hopes never to experience. The ISS is constantly being bombarded by micrometeoroids and space debris traveling at speeds up to 17,500 miles per hour. Most of this debris is too small to cause serious damage, but occasionally something larger gets through. A hole in the station's hull, even a small one, creates explosive decompression that can be fatal within seconds if not properly managed. The escaping air creates a hurricane-force wind that can suck loose objects, including people, toward the breach. Emergency protocols require crew members to immediately move to a safe module and seal it off from the damaged section. But here's the thing about emergency protocols. They require training, practice, and the ability to think clearly under pressure. You have none of these. In an emergency, while trained astronauts are executing well-rehearsed procedures, you would be floating around in panic, potentially getting in their way, or making dangerous mistakes that could get everyone killed. Equipment failures are constant and potentially catastrophic. The carbon dioxide scrubbers that remove CO2 from the air can malfunction, leading to CO2 poisoning that causes headaches, confusion, and eventually unconsciousness. The oxygen generation system can fail, requiring the crew to rely on backup systems or emergency supplies that have limited duration. The water recycling system, which processes urine and humidity into drinking water, can become contaminated or fail entirely. Without it, the crew has only a limited supply of stored water before they face dehydration and death. Computer systems that control life support, navigation, and communication can crash or be damaged by radiation, solar flares, or simple hardware failure. Backup systems exist, but they're not always automatic, and switching to backup systems requires knowledge and procedures that you don't possess. Medical emergencies in space are particularly terrifying because there's no hospital to evacuate to. Heart attacks, strokes, severe injuries, or acute illnesses have to be managed with whatever medical supplies and expertise are available aboard the station. In serious cases, the only option might be emergency evacuation to Earth, which takes hours to organize and execute. Even minor medical problems become serious in space. A kidney stone, which would be painful but manageable on Earth, could become life-threatening if it causes complications that can't be treated with the limited medical equipment aboard the ISS. The psychological stress of living with these constant risks, combined with the physical stress your body is already under, creates a state of hypervigilance that's exhausting and unsustainable. You find yourself listening for unusual sounds, watching for warning lights, and constantly worried that the next breath you take might be your last. This is hour 11, and you're realizing that the ISS isn't just a challenging place to live. It's a place where everything that can go wrong will eventually go wrong. And when it does, you're 250 miles away from any help. Hour 12. And your body has reached what medical professionals would classify as acute Physiological crisis. Every system in your body is now operating outside normal parameters, and the cumulative effects are reaching dangerous levels that would require immediate medical intervention if you were on Earth. Your cardiovascular system is in full revolt. The fluid shifts have created a condition similar to heart failure, where your body is retaining fluid in all the wrong places while simultaneously becoming dehydrated. Your blood pressure is swinging wildly between dangerous highs and dangerous lows as your heart tries to pump blood in an environment where normal circulation patterns don't apply. The excess fluid in your upper body has created pulmonary edema, where fluid begins to accumulate in your lungs. This makes breathing difficult and creates a feeling of drowning from the inside. Every breath requires conscious effort, and you feel like you're suffocating. Even though the oxygen levels in the station are normal, your kidneys are failing to process the abnormal fluid loads and the changes in blood chemistry caused by bone demineralization and muscle breakdown. Waste products that should be filtered out of your blood are building up to toxic levels. Your urine has become dark and concentrated, and you're producing much less of it despite drinking constantly. The bone demineralization that began within hours of entering zero gravity is now creating dangerous levels of calcium in your blood. This excess calcium is affecting your heart rhythm, your mental function, and your muscle coordination. You feel weak, confused, and your hands are trembling uncontrollably. Your immune system has essentially shut down from the combination of radiation exposure, stress hormones, and the unnatural environment. A simple cut or scrape that would heal quickly on Earth now becomes infected within hours. Your body has lost its ability to fight off bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens that are always present in the closed environment of the space station. The radiation exposure you've received in 12 hours is equivalent to several months of natural radiation exposure on Earth. While this won't cause immediate symptoms, it has already begun damaging your DNA at the cellular level, potentially triggering cancers that won't manifest for years or decades. Your nervous system is experiencing what can only be described as a complete breakdown. The combination of fluid pressure on your brain, sleep deprivation, stress hormones, and the disorienting effects of zero gravity has created a state where you can barely think clearly enough to perform simple tasks. Your inner ear has given up trying to provide balance information to your brain. Instead of the constant dizziness and nausea you experienced earlier, you now feel a strange disconnection from your body, like you're operating a biological machine from a great distance rather than inhabiting it directly. Vision problems have progressed from mild blurriness to significant impairment. The pressure changes in your eyes have begun to damage your optic nerves and retinas. Some of this damage may be permanent, meaning that even if you return to Earth immediately, your vision may never fully recover. Your digestive system has completely shut down normal operations. You can't keep food down, but you also can't stop feeling hungry. Your stomach produces acid constantly, creating burning pain that makes you feel like you're digesting yourself from the inside. The psychological effects have progressed beyond panic into a dissociative state where you feel detached from reality. The combination of physical distress, sensory overload, and the surreal nature of floating in space has created a mental condition that psychiatrists would classify as acute stress reaction with dissociative features. You're having trouble distinguishing between what's real and what might be hallucinations brought on by the combination of factors affecting your brain. Sounds seem distorted. Visual perception is unreliable, and you're beginning to have difficulty recognizing the faces of the astronauts around you. The trained astronauts aboard the station are now in full medical emergency mode. They're monitoring your vital signs constantly, communicating with ground-based medical personnel, and preparing for the possibility that you may need immediate evacuation to Earth or emergency medical intervention using the limited resources available aboard the station. This is Hour 12, and your body is sending a clear message. The human organism was never meant to leave the Earth, and staying in space any longer may cause damage that can never be repaired. Hour 13, and the astronauts have made the decision that you need immediate medical intervention. But here's the terrifying reality. There is no emergency room in space. There is no ambulance to call. There is no hospital to rush to. There is only the limited medical equipment aboard the ISS and the knowledge and skills of crew members who have some medical training but are not doctors. The medical bay on the ISS is about the size of a large closet, packed with equipment that looks like it belongs in a 1970s science fiction movie. There are monitors, oxygen tanks, basic surgical instruments, medications, and a defibrillator. But everything has to be designed for use in zero gravity, which makes it unfamiliar and difficult to use even for trained medical personnel. The astronaut attempting to treat you is fighting against physics itself. Every medical procedure that relies on gravity becomes a nightmare of floating instruments, drifting supplies, and the constant challenge of maintaining position while performing delicate tasks. The blood pressure cuff won't stay in place because your arm keeps floating away. The stethoscope drifts unless it's tethered, and even then, the chest piece floats off your skin unless held with constant pressure. When they try to take your temperature, the thermometer has to be secured to prevent it from floating away and potentially damaging equipment or being inhaled. Your core temperature is elevated not just from illness but from the metabolic stress of your body trying to function in an impossible environment. The pulse oximeter readings are erratic because the fluid shifts have changed your circulation patterns in ways the device wasn't designed to handle. Your oxygen saturation appears normal, but the readings don't account for the way blood is distributed differently throughout your body in zero gravity. Your vital signs are being monitored by equipment that has to account for the fluid shifts and cardiovascular changes caused by zero gravity. Your blood pressure readings don't match the normal ranges used on Earth because your circulatory system is operating in a completely different environment. The astronaut with the most medical training is trying to start an IV line to give you fluids and medications. But inserting an IV in zero gravity presents unique challenges. Blood doesn't flow downward to fill veins, making them difficult to locate and access. When the needle punctures your skin, blood forms perfect spheres that float away, instead of providing visual confirmation that the needle has found the vein. Any medical procedure that relies on gravity to work properly becomes complicated or impossible in space. Drawing blood requires special vacuum tubes because blood won't flow into collection containers on its own. Injections have to be given carefully because the medication might form bubbles or not distribute properly through your tissues. If you needed surgery, the challenges would be almost insurmountable. Surgical incisions would have to be made and closed while both the patient and the surgeon are floating. Blood and other fluids wouldn't drain away from the surgical site naturally. Anesthesia would be complicated by the cardiovascular and respiratory changes caused by zero gravity. The limited supply of medications aboard the ISS means that treatment options are severely restricted. If you needed a medication that wasn't in the station's medical kit, there would be no way to obtain it. Some medications may not work the same way in zero gravity, and dosing guidelines based on Earth normal physiology may not be appropriate. Emergency evacuation to Earth is possible using the Soyuz crew return vehicle, but it takes hours to prepare and execute, and the return journey subjects you to additional stresses that could worsen your condition. The Soyuz descent involves high G-forces, extreme temperature changes, and a parachute landing that can be rough even under the best conditions. During the evacuation process, you would be essentially trapped in a small capsule with minimal life support for the duration of the return journey. If your condition deteriorated during the flight, there would be very limited options for intervention. Even if you made it back to Earth alive, re-entering Earth's gravity after 13 hours in space would subject your weakened body to stresses it might not be able to handle. The cardiovascular system that has adapted to zero gravity would suddenly have to start pumping blood upward against gravity again. Bones that have begun to demineralize would have to support body weight again. The medical team on the ground would be prepared for your arrival, but they would be dealing with a combination of medical conditions that rarely occur together on Earth. Space medicine is a specialized field precisely because the human body behaves differently in space. And treating someone who has been in space requires knowledge and experience that most doctors don't possess. This is hour 13. And you're learning that getting sick in space isn't just uncomfortable or inconvenient. It's potentially fatal, because the infrastructure that keeps people alive during medical emergencies simply doesn't exist 250 miles above the Earth. Hour 14, and Mission Control has made the decision that cannot wait any longer. You need immediate evacuation to Earth. But even this immediate evacuation is going to take several more hours to prepare and execute. During those hours, your condition will continue to deteriorate in ways that could make the return journey even more dangerous. The Soyuz crew return vehicle has to be prepared for an emergency undocking and descent. This involves checking all systems, loading emergency medical supplies, calculating re-entry trajectories, and coordinating with recovery teams on the ground. Every minute of delay increases the risk, but rushing the preparation could create new dangers. While the evacuation is being prepared, the astronauts are doing everything they can to stabilize your condition, using the limited resources available aboard the ISS. You're being given oxygen, IV fluids, and medications to try to control your blood pressure, heart rhythm, and other vital functions. But your body is continuing to deteriorate. The pulmonary edema is getting worse, making it increasingly difficult to breathe. Your heart is struggling to pump effectively in the zero-gravity environment, while also dealing with the abnormal fluid distribution and blood chemistry changes. Your neurological condition is particularly concerning. The combination of increased intracranial pressure, radiation exposure, and severe stress has created symptoms that resemble a stroke or severe concussion. You're having difficulty speaking coherently, your movements are uncoordinated, and you're experiencing periods of confusion where you don't seem to recognize where you are or what's happening. The astronauts are maintaining constant radio contact with medical experts on Earth, describing your symptoms and receiving guidance on treatment options. But many of the standard treatments for your conditions can't be implemented in the space environment, leaving the crew with limited options for intervention. As the hours pass, your condition becomes more critical. Your blood pressure has dropped to dangerous levels, your heart rhythm is becoming irregular, and your respiratory rate is increasing as your body struggles to get enough oxygen despite the supplemental oxygen being provided. The psychological effects are equally severe. You're experiencing hallucinations, paranoid thoughts, and periods of agitation, alternating with periods of lethargy. The combination of physical and mental symptoms is creating a medical emergency that would be challenging to manage even in a fully equipped hospital. When the Soyuz is finally ready for departure, transferring you from the ISS to the crew return vehicle presents additional risks. You have to be moved through the vacuum of space while connected to life support equipment, strapped into a seat designed for healthy astronauts, and prepared for a journey that will subject your already stressed body to additional extreme conditions. The re-entry process involves intense G-forces as the capsule decelerates from orbital velocity to landing speed. Your weakened cardiovascular system may not be able to handle the stress of having blood pressed toward your feet by forces several times stronger than Earth's gravity. The parachute descent and landing are violent, even under normal circumstances. The capsule hits the ground hard enough to cause injuries to healthy astronauts, and your body's ability to withstand the impact is severely compromised. Recovery teams are standing by at the landing site with advanced medical equipment and trained paramedics. But they're dealing with a patient whose medical condition is unlike anything typically seen on Earth. Your body has been subjected to stresses and conditions that most medical professionals have never encountered. This is hour 14, and you're about to find out whether the human body can survive a journey it was never designed to make, followed by a return to an environment it may no longer be equipped to handle. Hour 15. And you're strapped into the Soyuz crew return vehicle, beginning what may be the most dangerous part of your entire space experience. The vehicle that seemed cramped when you were healthy now feels like a coffin as you lie there connected to monitoring equipment and oxygen supplies, barely conscious and completely dependent on systems you don't understand. The undocking from the ISS creates vibrations and motion that your inner ear, already completely confused by 15 hours in zero gravity, interprets as violent spinning in all directions simultaneously. You feel like you're tumbling end over end, even though the capsule is following a controlled trajectory away from the station. As the Soyuz begins its deorbit burn, you experience acceleration forces for the first time since leaving Earth. But instead of the gentle acceleration of a car or airplane, this feels like being pressed into your seat by an invisible giant hand. Your weakened cardiovascular system, which has spent 15 hours adapting to zero gravity, suddenly has to start working against acceleration forces again. The deorbit burn lasts several minutes, during which the spacecraft's engines fire to slow its orbital velocity and drop it into Earth's atmosphere. The acceleration forces, combined with your existing cardiovascular problems, create a sensation like drowning, while simultaneously being crushed. When the burn ends and you return to weightlessness for the final time, your body doesn't know how to interpret the transition. You feel like you're falling, which technically you are, but you're falling from 250 miles up at thousands of miles per hour, and your inner ear is sending panic signals to a brain that's already operating in emergency mode. The re-entry phase begins about 30 minutes after undocking, and this is where things get truly terrifying. As the Soyuz enters Earth's atmosphere at over 17,000 miles per hour, aerodynamic friction begins to slow the spacecraft while generating enormous amounts of heat and subjecting you to G-forces that would be difficult for a healthy person to endure. The initial contact with Earth's atmosphere creates a subtle vibration that quickly builds into violent shaking as the spacecraft encounters increasingly dense air. Your weakened body is thrown around despite being strapped tightly to your seat, and every impact sends jolts of pain through bones that have been weakening for hours. The G-forces build gradually from 0 to over 4 times Earth's gravity. But the transition feels anything but gradual when your cardiovascular system is already in crisis. It's like being slowly crushed by an invisible weight that increases pound by pound until you feel like your chest is being compressed by a hydraulic press. The sensation is indescribable to anyone who has never experienced high G-forces while critically ill. Your heart, already struggling with irregular rhythms and fluid overload, now has to pump blood that feels like it weighs 4 times its normal weight. Each heartbeat becomes a monumental effort that sends pain radiating through your chest. Your lungs, partially filled with fluid from the pulmonary edema, struggle to expand against the crushing force pressing down on your chest. Each breath requires conscious effort and determination, like trying to inflate a balloon while someone is sitting on your rib cage. The oxygen mask provides supplemental oxygen, but your ability to actually get that oxygen into your bloodstream is severely compromised. Your vision doesn't just gray out. It tunnels down to a pinprick of light as blood is pressed away from your brain toward your feet. The world becomes a narrow tube of fuzzy awareness, surrounded by expanding darkness. You feel like you're looking at reality through the wrong end of a telescope while someone slowly turns down the brightness. The heat generated by atmospheric friction turns the plasma surrounding the spacecraft into a glowing inferno that's visible through the small windows of the capsule. But this isn't the beautiful light show that astronauts often describe. Through your dimming vision and pain-clouded awareness, the fire outside looks like the flames of hell surrounding your metal coffin as it plummets toward Earth. Your body temperature starts rising as the heat from re-entry begins to penetrate the spacecraft's thermal protection. Even though the heat shield is working properly, the capsule's interior temperature climbs steadily, and you're too weak to thermoregulate properly. Sweat that would normally evaporate to cool your skin just clings to your body, creating a layer of hot moisture that makes you feel like you're being steamed alive. The radio blackout during the most intense part of re-entry isn't just a communication issue, it's a psychological torture. The plasma surrounding the spacecraft blocks all radio signals, cutting you off from mission control just when you need them most. For 4.5 minutes, you're completely isolated in a burning meteor with no way to call for help if something goes wrong. During this blackout period, the only sounds are the creaking and groaning of the spacecraft structure, the roar of air passing over the heat shield, and your own labored breathing, amplified by the oxygen mask. Every new sound makes you wonder if something critical has just failed, if the heat shield is burning through, if the parachute system has been damaged. The plasma fire outside the windows creates an eerie, flickering light that illuminates the capsule's interior in shades of orange and red. Combined with your altered mental state and the extreme physical stress, this creates a surreal, nightmarish environment that makes you question whether you're still alive or dying in some cosmic purgatory. The parachute deployment sequence begins at about 30 feet altitude. But instead of the gentle floating descent you might imagine, the parachute deployment creates violent jerking motions as the spacecraft rapidly decelerates from supersonic to subsonic speeds. Each parachute deployment feels like being rear-ended by a truck while strapped to a chair. Your body, already at its limits, is subjected to these rapid deceleration forces while simultaneously having to readjust to the gradual return of Earth's gravity. Blood begins flowing back toward your legs, creating a sensation like all the fluid in your body is draining downward, while your heart struggles to maintain circulation. The final approach to landing is supposed to be controlled by retro rockets that fire just before impact to soften the touchdown, but Soyuz landings are notoriously hard even under the best conditions. The capsule hits the ground with enough force to crack teeth and cause injuries to healthy astronauts. This is hour 15, and you're about to find out if your body can survive the violent transition from the hostile environment of space back to the only environment where human life is possible. Hour 16. And the Soyuz capsule hits the ground in the Kazakhstan steppe with an impact that feels like being in a car accident while already critically ill. The retro rockets fire at the last second to reduce the landing speed, but the touchdown is still violent enough to rattle your bones and jar your already damaged brain against the inside of your skull. Recovery teams have been tracking the descending capsule and are already rushing toward the landing site. But even under the best conditions, it takes time to reach the crew and extract them from the spacecraft. The capsule lies on its side in a cloud of dust and scattered parachute fabric, looking like a meteorite that has just crashed to Earth. When the recovery team reaches the capsule and opens the hatch, they're greeted by the sight of you in obvious medical distress, barely conscious and connected to monitoring equipment that shows vital signs far outside normal ranges. The trained astronauts who accompanied you on the return journey are also affected by the stresses of re-entry, but their condition is stable compared to yours. The medical team immediately begins emergency treatment using equipment that seems miraculous after 15 hours of limited medical resources in space. IV lines are established to provide fluids and medications. Oxygen flow is increased, and cardiac monitoring shows the irregular heart rhythms and blood pressure swings that have characterized your condition since the early hours aboard the ISS. But your body's response to returning to Earth's gravity is creating new medical problems. Blood that has been floating freely in your upper body for 15 hours suddenly has to be pumped upward against gravity again. Your heart, weakened by the space environment and the stresses of re-entry, struggles to maintain adequate circulation. When the medical team attempts to help you sit up, your blood pressure drops dangerously as blood pools in your legs and abdomen. This orthostatic hypotension is so severe that you lose consciousness within seconds of being moved to an upright position. You have to remain flat on your back to maintain adequate blood flow to your brain. Your bones, which began demineralizing within hours of entering zero gravity, are now being asked to support your body weight again. The pain in your back and joints is excruciating as your skeleton readjusts to bearing weight. Some astronauts describe the return to gravity as feeling like their bones are made of glass and about to shatter. The muscle weakness caused by 15 hours in zero gravity is immediately apparent. You can't lift your arms against gravity, can't hold your head up, and your leg muscles are too weak to support your body weight. It's like trying to function with the strength of a newborn while your body weighs what it did before you left Earth. The helicopter transport to the nearest medical facility subjects you to additional stresses as your body tries to cope with vibration, noise, and continued medical interventions while readjusting to gravity. Every movement of the aircraft creates sensations that your confused inner ear interprets as violent motion in multiple directions. At the medical facility, doctors trained in space medicine begin the complex process of treating conditions that rarely occur on Earth. Your fluid and electrolyte balance is severely disrupted, requiring careful monitoring and gradual correction to avoid causing additional complications. The vision problems that develop during your time in space require evaluation by ophthalmologists who specialize in space-related eye injuries. Some of the changes to your retinas and optic nerves may be permanent, meaning your vision may never completely return to normal. Neurological testing reveals the extent of the damage caused by increased intracranial pressure, radiation exposure, and severe stress. Your cognitive function is impaired, your coordination is poor, and you're experiencing memory problems that may persist for weeks or months. The psychological effects of your space experience are equally concerning. You're showing signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, with flashbacks to moments of panic during your time aboard the ISS, nightmares about being trapped in space, and anxiety attacks triggered by enclosed spaces or mechanical noises. This is hour 16, and you're back on Earth. But your body and mind are still trying to recover from an experience that pushed human physiology far beyond its limits. Hour 24, and you've survived your first day back on Earth. But survived might be too strong a word for what you've experienced. After 16 hours in space, followed by 8 hours of intensive medical care on Earth, your body is beginning the long, uncertain process of recovery from an ordeal it was never designed to endure. The medical team has stabilized your immediate life-threatening conditions, but the full extent of the damage caused by your brief stay in space is still being assessed. Blood tests reveal abnormalities in virtually every measurable parameter. Your calcium levels are elevated from bone demineralization. Your red blood cell count is low from the space environment's effects on blood production, and stress hormone levels are higher than anything the doctors have seen outside of major trauma cases. The laboratory results paint a picture of systemic breakdown that's both fascinating and terrifying to the medical team treating you. Your white blood cell count is severely depressed, indicating that your immune system has essentially shut down from the combination of radiation, stress, and the alien environment of space. Inflammatory markers are through the roof, suggesting that your body is in a state of crisis, similar to what's seen in severe sepsis or major burns. Your liver enzymes are elevated, indicating that this vital organ has been damaged by the combination of medications, stress hormones, and the metabolic chaos your body has endured. The kidneys show signs of acute stress, with elevated creatinine levels and abnormal electrolyte balances that will require careful monitoring and gradual correction over the coming days. Your cardiovascular system is slowly beginning to readjust to Earth's gravity. But the process is proving more difficult than expected. Every attempt to sit up or stand results in dangerous drops in blood pressure and loss of consciousness. Your heart has to relearn how to pump blood upward against gravity. And this relearning process may take weeks or months. The echocardiogram reveals changes to your heart structure that developed in just 16 hours of weightlessness. The left ventricle has become slightly enlarged from the fluid overload, and the heart muscle shows signs of stress that may take months to resolve. The electrical system of your heart remains unstable, with irregular rhythms that require continuous monitoring and medication to control. Your blood vessels have also changed in response to the space environment. The lack of gravitational stress has caused them to lose some of their elasticity and tone, contributing to the severe orthostatic hypotension that makes it impossible for you to stand without fainting. Physical therapy will be required to help your vascular system readapt to Earth's gravity. The fluid that accumulated in your head and upper body during your time in space is gradually redistributing. But this process is causing its own problems. As fluid moves back toward your lower body, you're experiencing severe swelling in your legs and feet that makes them look like water balloons. The skin is stretched tight and shiny, and pressing on it leaves deep indentations that take minutes to resolve. Meanwhile, the reduction in cranial pressure is causing rebound headaches that are so severe they require narcotic pain medication to control. These aren't ordinary headaches. They feel like someone is driving railroad spikes through your skull while simultaneously inflating a balloon inside your brain. The pain is so intense that even dim light becomes unbearable. Your inner ear may never fully recover from the trauma of 16 hours in zero gravity. The otoliths that help you sense orientation have been damaged by the space environment, and you're experiencing persistent dizziness, nausea, and balance problems that make it difficult to walk or coordinate simple movements. Even lying still in bed, you feel like the room is spinning in multiple directions simultaneously. The neurological examination reveals more extensive damage than initially apparent. Your reaction times are severely delayed. Your coordination is poor, and you're having difficulty with basic cognitive tasks, like remembering numbers or following simple instructions. The MRI shows subtle changes in your brain tissue, consistent with increased intracranial pressure and possible radiation damage. The bone density loss that occurred during your brief stay in space will take months or years to reverse, if it reverses completely at all. DEXA scans show measurable decreases in bone mineral density throughout your skeleton, with the most severe losses in your spine and hips. Some of the calcium that was leached from your bones may have caused permanent damage to other organs, particularly your kidneys, which had to process the abnormal calcium loads. Your muscles have atrophied to a degree that seems impossible for such a short time in space. But the combination of zero gravity, stress, and illness has accelerated the normal muscle wasting process. You can't lift your arms above your head, can't sit up without assistance, and your leg muscles are so weak that standing is impossible even with support. The muscle biopsy results are particularly disturbing, showing cellular changes that typically take weeks to develop. The muscle fibers have begun breaking down at the molecular level, and some of the damage may be irreversible. Physical therapy will be essential, but the doctors are uncertain about how much function you'll ultimately recover. Your immune system, severely compromised by the stress and radiation exposure of space travel, is slowly beginning to recover, but you're at high risk for infections and other complications during the recovery period. Your white blood cell count remains dangerously low, and even minor illnesses could become life-threatening because your body's ability to fight off pathogens has been severely compromised. The radiation exposure you received during your brief stay in space has increased your lifetime risk of cancer, although the magnitude of this increase won't be known for years or decades. The damage to your DNA is permanent and may manifest as health problems later in life. Blood tests show chromosomal damage consistent with significant radiation exposure, and you'll need to be monitored for the rest of your life for signs of radiation-related illness. But perhaps the most profound and lasting effects are psychological. You're experiencing severe post-traumatic stress disorder, with symptoms that include flashbacks, nightmares, panic attacks, and an overwhelming fear of enclosed spaces. The sound of mechanical equipment, particularly fans or pumps, causes immediate anxiety attacks, as your brain associates these sounds with life support systems that could fail. Sleep is nearly impossible, not just because of the physical discomfort, but because of recurring nightmares about being trapped in space, unable to return to Earth. When you do manage to fall asleep, you often wake up in a panic, thinking you're still floating in zero gravity and unable to find solid ground. The nightmares are so vivid and terrifying that you've begun refusing sleep medication because you're afraid of being unable to wake up if you need to. Your relationship with food has been fundamentally altered by the traumatic eating experiences in space. The sight or smell of processed foods triggers nausea and anxiety, and you find it difficult to eat enough to support your recovery because your body associates eating with the misery you experienced aboard the ISS. You've lost significant weight since returning to Earth, and nutritional support may be necessary. The claustrophobia is particularly severe and debilitating. Being in any enclosed space, even a hospital room with the door closed, triggers panic attacks that require immediate intervention. You can't tolerate MRI scans or CT scans without heavy sedation because the enclosed space of the machine reminds you of being trapped in the ISS. Even elevators are impossible to use. The psychiatric evaluation reveals the full extent of the psychological trauma. You're showing signs of dissociation, where you feel disconnected from your own body and experiences. There are periods where you don't feel like the person who went to space, as if that experience happened to someone else, and you're just watching the memories like a movie. Depression has set in as you begin to understand the full scope of the permanent damage that 16 hours in space has caused to your body and mind. The knowledge that some of these effects may never fully resolve creates a sense of loss and grief that's difficult to process. You feel like you've lost the person you were before going to space, and you're not sure who you are now. The doctors are cautiously optimistic about your physical recovery, but they're honest about the fact that some of the effects of your space experience may be permanent. Your vision may never fully return to normal due to the damage to your retinas and optic nerves. Your bone density may never completely recover, leaving you at higher risk for fractures for the rest of your life. Your cardiovascular fitness may be permanently impaired, affecting your ability to exercise or perform physical activities. The neurological damage is particularly concerning because the brain has limited ability to repair itself. While some cognitive function may return over time, there's a real possibility that you'll have permanent deficits in memory, concentration, and coordination. The radiation damage to your brain tissue may also increase your risk of dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases later in life. But perhaps the most profound effect of your experience is psychological. You've gained a deep, visceral understanding of how hostile the space environment is to human life. The romantic vision of space travel as an exciting adventure has been replaced by the knowledge that leaving Earth means entering an environment that is constantly trying to kill you in ways both obvious and subtle. You've learned that the International Space Station, despite being one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements, is essentially a life support system that keeps human beings barely alive in an environment where they have no business being. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of consciousness in space is made possible only by complex machines and systems that could fail at any time. This is hour 24 of your ordeal, and you're beginning to understand why astronauts train for years before going to space, and why even then, many of them experience serious health problems during and after their missions. The human body simply wasn't designed to leave Earth, and when it does, the consequences can be severe. lasting, and sometimes fatal. Your brief, disastrous stay aboard the International Space Station has given you a profound appreciation for the thin layer of atmosphere and the steady pull of gravity that make life possible on Earth. You've learned that space isn't empty and peaceful. It's actively hostile, filled with radiation, debris, and conditions that are inimical to human survival. The astronauts who work aboard the ISS for months at a time aren't just brave. They're engaging in one of the most physically and psychologically demanding activities humans have ever attempted. They're pushing the limits of human endurance and adaptability, and many of them pay a permanent price in terms of their health and well-being. But they do it anyway, because the knowledge gained from human spaceflight is essential for our understanding of space, our planet, and ourselves. They accept the risks and the suffering because they're pushing the boundaries of human experience and capability. You, on the other hand, lasted less than 16 hours before your body began shutting down and your mind started breaking under the stress. You wouldn't last a day on the International Space Station because you're not trained, prepared, or equipped to handle the extreme demands that space places on the human body and mind. The next time you look up at the night sky and see the ISS passing overhead, a bright dot moving steadily across the stars, you'll remember what it feels like to be inside that dot, floating in a metal tube surrounded by the infinite vacuum of space, completely dependent on machines and systems for every breath, completely cut off from the Earth that gave you life and to which you were lucky to return. Space is beautiful from a distance, but up close, it's a reminder of how precious and fragile life on Earth really is. And now you know why you wouldn't last a day up there among the stars.